Hello and welcome to Busting the Myth on Negative Gearing. The reason I'm shooting this blog today is one of the questions that nearly all of my new investors ask me is, Lynne, is the government going to can negative gearing? And one of the things that I really wanted to put together was a compilation, and I'm using Deloitte's recent myth busting on negative gearing report, which has been fantastic, and I'm pretty sure Simon did an article in our newsletter last week on it. But the Australian taxation system has had several reforms. The major one that I know of, which I wrote about in my first book, was in the 30s. Essentially, before the Second World War, all the states collected taxes. Before, during, early part of the war, the states handed it to the federal government. And the federal government has stayed as the major tax collector in the country. What we had in those 40s, in the 30s and 40s, was great tax reform. And it's one of the things that has underpinned the success of not only our tax system, but our economic health here in Australia. One of the reasons we weren't hit so badly in the GFC is part of the tax reforms in the 30s and 40s was that banks had to keep a certain amount of funds liquid every day as part of their asset base. Now, if you've got a bank that's literally got cash in the bank, they're less likely to fail. And if you have regulations around that, then you've got a solid economy. And that's one of the things that kept us in such good stead here during the GFC. What I want to talk about today is negative gearing and busting the myth. So here's the thing, if you turn on AM radio, you'll often hear things like negative gearing is responsible for driving of house prices. Let's take that one for a start because that's a bit passionate to all of us. As an investor, I am unashamedly wanting the market to increase. Yes, it's hard for new people to get into the market, and there's a whole lot of ways we can help new people coming into the market. But as a loaf of bread will not be worth the same in 10 years' time, a litre of milk will not be worth the same in 10 years' time, neither will a house. Your car is unlikely to be worth the same in 10 years' time. So you get the picture. So what I've done is I've got my financial planning division here at Solid to run me some pretty good statistics, because if we want to have and hold the belief that negative gearing is responsible for property prices being driven up, well, what is negative gearing responsible for then when the market is really down? A down market. Okay, how many down markets have we had? Well, as a matter of fact, there's a list. I started remembering it, but it was so long I had to print it. So if we take the last 45 years, we had a down market in 1961, then we had another down market in 1972, 74, 75, 77, 83, 91. So if you then look at from 91, in the last 2.5 decades, we've also had at least 6 flat markets and at least 4 bull markets that I can remember. So if negative gearing has flatlined and been available to the Australian taxpayers, I think we can easily bust the myth that negative gearing is responsible for house prices being at giddy heights. The reason that house prices are at giddy heights is that Melbourne is the most livable city in the world. Sydney and Adelaide are in the top 10. Vancouver, you know the list, it's published every year. We talk about it regularly here. Victoria's population will hit 5.7 million this December. We are a really sought after place to live, and unfortunately, part of our landscape is a bay and the other part of our landscape is a set of mountains. So we only have a certain amount of land available. Unlike if you went to a region like Shepparton, where you've got acres and acres and acres of orchards that are being freed up for land, it's pretty inexhaustive. If you're looking to buy in Melbourne, one of the reasons the east is so popular is that it squeezes out between the ocean, the bay, and the mountains. If you actually do a geographical study on Melbourne, it's quite fascinating as to where the available land actually is, where the amenities are and where the transport are. It's not hard to work out what are the areas that are going to be really, really popular. So if we've had 4 major recessions, and I'm not talking down markets, I'm talking major recessions since the new tax reforms. On average, we have a major recession every 20 years in Australia. What happens to property prices? They actually fall. What happened in the GFC? The market fell. Now, we were quite fortunate in Australia because the market in England went minus 11%. We went down to plus 2 here. But the reality is negative gearing was alive and well during that time. So there endeth the discussion on negative gearing being responsible for house prices being crazy. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about with negative gearing is a fundamental cornerstone foundation of our tax system. I run a business here at Solid. I earn commissions off my properties, and I also earn $500 for the mentor fee. On that I have to pay GST, and then I get to deduct my wages, my staff superannuation, I get to deduct my rental, and I get to deduct stationery and my radio advertising. Then if I buy something that's over $400, I actually get to depreciate that. So if you look at and if I actually borrow money to do something, I then can claim the interest as a deduction. So if you look at how my company runs, any company runs, whether it's a company, a partnership, a sole trader, if you're earning income, you can deduct your expenses. It's the same in negative gearing. If you're earning rental income and you've got a loan against that, and you've got expenses and you've got depreciation, even cutting a key is an expense. Depreciation, of course, on apartments is a lot greater because you get a portion of the common areas as well. So when you think about negative gearing being the big bad omen and responsible for so much of where the property market's at today, I'm really sorry. All that is filler for radio, talkback and newspapers that have run out of something to talk about. Negative gearing is the foundation of the Australian taxation system. You take away negative gearing and suddenly I'm running a company and I can't deduct my wages. I can't deduct superannuation. I can't deduct my rent. So when you really pull it apart and put it back together again, negative gearing is here to stay. Depreciation is here to stay. You would have to have such dramatic reforms, and I can't even think how you would begin to do that, to change the way we run when we receive an income and we incur expenses and we have to buy tools of trade to perform that. So I'll sign off on that. I'm really curious. If anyone's got any questions, happy to take it. Lynne@solidgroup.com.au, 9500 8000, happy to talk to anybody. But also the Deloitte's report, if you want to Google Deloitte's report on negative gearing, it's about a 12-15 page report. It's brilliant. Thank you for listening.